I'm taking a lot for granted here. I know that. I'm just pronounce these things as though they were so. And if you're in that young woman's position and almost done with God, you might be very skeptical. So let me think with you for a minute about why Christians talk like this. There are 27 books in the New Testament, that part of our Bible. And we believe that those 27 books record truth about Jesus. They tell the truth about Jesus. That's what they're all about, is Jesus. We think they're true. They all assume or speak explicitly that he rose from the dead. All of those books either assume it or say it out loud. So there's just a uniform testimony in the New Testament that he rose from the dead. And we have to decide, now, what do we do with that? That claim of these books that he rose from the dead, these 27 letters and Gospels and Acts and Revelation. These 27 books are shot through with witnesses to the resurrection. I'll just read you one, since this is Easter and we should listen. So here's John 20, 27 and 28. Jesus has come back from the dead, it says, and he has confronted his apostles who abandoned him. They were so afraid when he got arrested that they'd be killed too. They just fled. After 3 years of his loyalty, they weren't loyal. And he's meeting them, and he's not meeting them with any bitterness at all. He had none on the cross. He doesn't have any now. He is a incredibly amazing, one-of-a-kind person. Thomas, indeed all of them, were very skeptical. They were not gullible. And Thomas said, I'm not believing in this. If I put my finger in his hands, I might believe. 8 days later, Jesus shows up to Thomas. So that's what we're reading in verses 27 and 28. Jesus says to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side where the spear went in. Do not disbelieve, but believe. And Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. So that's what you have throughout the New Testament, is people having encountered the living Christ and they're testifying, my Lord and my God. We talk like that. Christians talk like that. We do that, and we do because we're in a line. We're in a line of people, starting with those who saw him. And we just have to decide, okay, what are we going to do with that witness? These accounts in the New Testament are 1,000 miles away from myth. Like Greek mythology and Roman mythology, which means that it's all about the gods, and there's just no connection with the real history of Greece and Rome. It's just way off there in La La Land, this mythology. This is just thousands of miles away from that, because you've got Pilate, the governor. You've got Herod, the king from Galilee. You've got Caiaphas, the high priest. And history outside the Bible knows all about these people. This is real history. This is really there. It's not mythology, which is why it's so vulnerable. Scholars can read this and just say it doesn't mean what we say it means or not, but they got to deal with it. It's just there in history. Among the accounts, you have this consistent statement that these are eyewitness reports or dependent on eyewitness reports. Paul, for example, who wrote 13 of the books of the New Testament, said in 1 Corinthians 15 that in his time, as he was trying to persuade the Corinthians to take the resurrection seriously, he said, He appeared to Cephas, Peter. He appeared to James. He appeared to the 11. And then he appeared to 500 people at once, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Now, why did he say that? He said it because they could just go ask him. I mean, just think of it. If you could do that, I could give you 350 people to talk to who saw him alive after he was dead. That's pretty impressive. And that's the feel you get from these writers in the New Testament, is that they were right there. Just picture the timing here. All I'm trying to do is press on you how distant this is from mythology. Picture the time frame. Paul's letter started to be written about 15 years after Jesus' death. The last one was written about 30 years after Jesus' death. Most of the letters of the books of the New Testament were written probably before 70 AD. It may be that John, this one, was written 90 or so AD. So they span time from, say, 60 years after Jesus died down to 15 years, which would mean, if we bring that into our situation, suppose we were the apostles, it means that for some of us in writing our books, Jesus was active in the late 80s, 1980s. Now I'm 65. I've been here for 30 years at this church, almost 31. I know what happened in the late 80s. And so do several hundred other people here. Or for others, it would be the 1970s. And for John, it might be the 1950s, because he lived to be a very old man. This is not mythology. This is eyewitness memory. The tomb was empty. Picture yourself as the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees and the Herodians, all of them desperately afraid that this crazy cult called Christians is going to spread. And so, let us find that body. Let us wheel that body in a wheelbarrow to show this cannot make any headway. And they couldn't do it. They had all the authority to do it. And they couldn't do it because the tomb was empty and there was no dead body. And if you were to think, which is what somebody in every generation writes a book about. When I was in college, it was the Passover plot. Good grief. Every generation has to do this. Try to reconstruct those days as though the disciples stole the body, hid it, made it all up, and then went out and died for it. Those disciples were so afraid that they abandoned him. They just left. We're not getting ourselves crucified. No way. Peter, I'll go to death for you. And he denies him 3 times. He's so afraid. And those people, within a week or two, are going to make up the whole New Testament mythology and then go out and be killed for it. This is absurd. It's as absurd as a resurrection from the dead. Which is why so many scholars have written strong defenses of the historical event of the resurrection of Jesus. So I brought along a couple of books. Just a few of you care about scholarship. But for the few of you, you should know this. Okay? So now here's a big, fat 500-page book. Written by a professor of New Testament at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland named Richard Bauckham. The title is Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. Subtitle, The Gospels as Eyewitness Testimony. So here's my little place here at the end of the book and his summary. The Jesus the Gospels portray is Jesus as these eyewitnesses portrayed him, the Jesus of testimony. It took 500 pages to get there. So if you love really rigorous, careful, historical research, this is at Amazon. And then we're in John. This man, Richard Bauckham, is so burdened to try to make his case that he did a whole book on the Gospel of John to the same effect. This one is called The Testimony, that's the key word, of the beloved disciple who wrote John, he argues. And the subtitle, Narrative, History, and Theology in the Gospel of John. And I don't know. John has indicated that he takes seriously his own programmatic statement of the theological significance of real history. The Word became flesh. He intends to be faithful to the history. And then he tries to defend that. So if you like, to read this kind of rigorous stuff, Richard Bauckham, Baukham, are available. What's the point of the last 10 minutes? The point of the last 10 minutes is that what we're dealing with in these claims of resurrection is the furthest thing from mythology. It's just so utterly rooted in history. It is so closely attended by hundreds of people. These hundreds of people are living as the New Testament books are being written. You can't get away with creating things when hundreds of people are looking over your shoulder who saw it all. You just can't. So whatever you make of that, at least make this. True or not, it's not mythology. Whatever you do, it's just not. It's utter history, and you just have to come up with some way of coming to terms with it, and Christians come to terms with it because we have met Jesus in these accounts, and he has simply won our trust. That's the way it happened. We met Jesus reading or hearing the stories, and he proved himself to us. He stood forth as, nobody speaks like this man. I can't escape from this man. I can't run away. I can't make him into a fool. I can't make him into a liar. This man is real. These testimonies are not jerks. These people are not wacko. They're just witness. That's what they do. And witnesses have to just be believed or not. You can't prove history. It's not like math. 2 + 2 is 4. You can't prove history. You just hear witnesses, and then you decide, okay, is there good reason to embrace this, or isn't there? And that's where you all are. You're on the brink of that decision.